Hollywood used to be the land of creativity and sexual assault. Well, now it's just the land of sexual assault because creativity in Tinseltown is dead. These days, all we can expect from them are sequels and remakes. And what's the latest movie to be remade for no reason at all? The Wizard of Oz. According to the writer and director of the remake that no one wants and no one asked for, the movie will be updated to feature LGBTQ representation as part of a story that reflects our current world. And also because it's the only way you can win an Oscar anymore. The Wizard of Woke goes way over the rainbow and stars the Scarecrow, who doesn't have a brain and is related to Jim Crow, the Tin Woman, who doesn't have a heart, and Dorothy, who does have a penis. We got an early look at the plot, and here's what we learned. Dorothy is now going to be an intern in Washington, D.C., when a MAGA tornado rips through the city. In the chaos, she, and her dog Toto will then be whisked away to the magical world of Oz, where the Wicked Witch of the East is immediately killed by the housing market crashing on her head. Because of the wizard's open border policies, it takes Dorothy and her new allies forever to reach the Emerald City because the yellow brick road is blocked by a caravan of illegal munchkins. Sorry, illegal little people. When Dorothy finally makes it to see the wizard, she's traumatized after he sniffs her hair and invites her to check out what's going on behind the curtain. Honestly though, I think the Wizard of Oz was already woke. Glinda has so much white privilege she can float around on it, the Tin Man is constantly asking to get greased up like he's at a drag queen story hour, and the entire original movie is already a metaphor for modern America. Dorothy destroys the home of a working-class American family, murders an innocent bystander before stealing her shoes, and then hunts down and kills the victim's bereaved sister, who's literally a woman of color because she dared to push for justice. Even in the imaginary world of Oz, white people get away with anything. I'm Ian Haworth, and this is Off Limits. Welcome back to episode 9, which is also the worst Star Wars movie. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you can get first dibs on all the latest Off Limits videos. Like the video and leave a comment, and follow me on social media. All the links you need are in the description below. Well, if there's one thing we've learned recently about our American media, it's that despite all of their claims of deeply adoring multiculturalism, they actually have zero tolerance for any culture that doesn't abide by their own political agenda. For all their talk about global respect and accepting other cultures and traditions, the media is often surprised to find out that different cultures are actually different. Take Christiane Amanpour's recent interview with incoming Kenyan President William Ruto. She was shocked to find out that in a country riddled with poverty, starvation, and crime, the new president's main concern wasn't legalizing gay marriage. You know, gay marriage, that thing that Barack Obama said should be illegal up until 2012. Well, our media has done it again, this time in Italy. The Italian people just elected a new prime minister, and you're not going to believe it. She's a woman. I know, this is yet another big hit to the patriarchy, a low blow. The first female prime minister in Italy ever. You'd think that the press would be all over this, praising the various shattered glass ceilings and patriarchies that have been adequately screwed. But as it turns out, we got none of that. Not even a single crack in the ceiling. You know why? Because as it turns out, this new prime ministress, Giorgia Meloni, is a fascist. Just listen to this.
Italians have voted in the country's most right-wing government since World War II. Meloni claims she will put traditional Italians and their values first, but her opponents say she could take Italy down the path of illiberal democracies such as Hungary.
Tonight, Italy is preparing for its first ever female prime minister and its first leader from the far right since the Second World War. Meloni's party has ideological roots in Italy's neo-fascist movement, a movement that gained traction after dictator Benito Mussolini.
This lady is one spicy meatball. Thank goodness the American media is stepping in. Just imagine the kind of terror the world would face with a fascist leader in charge of a country that hasn't been globally relevant since 476 AD. To witness the terror ourselves, we sent our Southern European correspondent Nick to the latest fascist fatherland to investigate. After speaking with hundreds of Albanians, Nick finally found an Italian to talk to, who said that their chief concern is illegal immigration. As an avid member of Antifa, Nick was so angry at this fascist that he threw him into the sea. Luckily, his fall was broken by a flotilla of makeshift rafts recently arrived from Morocco. Nick then asked another Meloni supporter if he was happy that the new prime minister was abolishing all political parties, jailing enemies without trial, demolishing labor unions, establishing a national police force, shutting down free press, and forcing the population into collectivist, top-down controlled economic units defined by their brutalist architecture. The confused man apparently said, "What are you talking about?" In her speech, she is literally just promoting traditional values that any sane person would have seen as completely normal less than a decade ago, promising to get unsustainable illegal immigration under control, and letting Italians know that they shouldn't be ashamed of having a national identity and preserving their unique culture. Unfortunately, he said all of these words in a silly language that none of us understood, so who knows? In the end, even though it looks like we lost another one for the patriarchy, don't worry, at least she's a fascist. People have suddenly discovered that radical Islamic regimes which fund terror across the world and are hell-bent on murdering every Jew in Israel aren't very nice. Dozens of protesters have been killed by security forces in Iran after citizens took to the streets following the death of a young Iranian woman in police custody. Mahsa Amini, who was 22 years old, was arrested on September 13th in Tehran for unsuitable attire by the country's so-called morality police, who enforced the Islamic Republic's dress code. Her crime? Refusing to wear a hijab. She died 3 days later in hospital after falling into a coma. Iranian police claim she had a heart attack, while eyewitnesses and other women who were detained say Amini was insulted, tortured, and severely beaten, with leaked medical scans appearing to show signs of cerebral hemorrhage and stroke. Demonstrations have broken out across the country, with women burning headscarves, and many protesters have been met with deadly violence. The Biden administration quickly condemned the Iranian government's use of violence against its own people. Joe Biden expressed solidarity with Iranian women, while Secretary of State Antony Blinken demanded an end to violence. They wanted to say more, but they had to get back to bending over a barrel for the Iranian government in order to revive Obama's disastrous nuclear agreement so the world's largest funder of terrorism can get back to building nuclear weapons while also receiving pallets of cash from the US government. That's called jihadi having your kebab and eating it too. Several celebrities have also spoken out against the violence in Iran, including Bella Hadid. Vogue Arabia, which is like regular Vogue but all the women have to be a few pages behind the men, reported that Bella Hadid spoke out against the Iranian regime on Instagram. This is the same Bella Hadid who marched in New York and sang a genocidal song about the terrorists who Iran supports, driving all the Jews from Israel into the sea. Because, yeah. And finally, there's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who couldn't find Iran on a map, but is a genius when it comes to making quite literally everything about herself. She compared the Islamic regime of Iran to patriarchal forces repressing women all over the world, including in the United States, arguing that the right to not wear a hijab is the same as the right to get an abortion. She didn't mention the right to remain silent, which is something she should really consider. And in case you missed it, with Hurricane Ian slamming into the southeast, it was a difficult week for people called Ian. When I announced I was going to be coming to Georgia, Brian Kemp even declared a state of emergency, which was flattering but unnecessary. A video also resurfaced from the Biden administration telling Americans to prepare for hurricane season by getting vaccinated.
If you're in a state where hurricanes often strike, like Florida or the Gulf Coast or into Texas, a vital part of preparing for hurricane season is to get vaccinated now.
Following this advice, Florida Democrats were left miraculously unharmed by the hurricane, having gotten their fourth booster and nailing masks on their doors. It's like a modern Exodus story. This week, NASA's Double Asteroid Redirection Test, or DART, successfully hit its asteroid target, in the first test of defensive technology designed to protect the planet from an asteroid bound for Earth. Bruce Willis condemned the project, saying that he was now out of a job. Vice President Kamala Harris finally visited the border between North Korea and South Korea. Both sides begged her not to come, with the Korean government releasing a last-minute plea to help stave off disaster.
Do not come. Do not come.
But she persisted, and her unique style of diplomacy was so effective that nuclear war immediately broke out and killed us all. And during an event at the White House, Joe Biden asked the crowd where Representative Jackie Walorski was.
Representative Jackie, are you here? Where's Jackie? I didn't think she was going to be here to help make this a reality.
She died in August, and Joe Biden and Jill Biden released a statement mourning her death at the time. If you ever wondered what happened to the kid in Sixth Sense, he became President of the United States. Don't forget to support the show by checking out the official Off Limits store at watchofflimits.com/shop, where you can get your new favorite mug, tote bag, hoodie, yard sign, and much more. We need your help, because not everyone was born with a silver spoon in their mouth. Speaking of which, Gavin Newsom is the worst. When it comes to 2024, Democrats are panicking. Their frontrunner, or front shuffler, is obviously Joe Biden, a senile old man who sees dead people, whose wife doubles as a round-the-clock nurse, who drags him around and tries her best to stop him from groping any teenage girls in his path. Then there's Bernie Sanders, who's leaving the door open for a potential run. Of course, the door will have to be one of those automatic opening doors with a ramp, because Bernie's 1,000 years old. Vice President Kamala Harris is comically awful. She was put in charge of the migrant crisis, and look how that's going. And she's essentially a human predictive text machine who spends her time laughing or failing to speak English. And Pete Buttigieg was only chosen for Secretary of Transportation because he's gay and likes trains. And we can't have a president who is on paternity leave every 5 minutes. So who else could they possibly choose? Elizabeth Warren is too white now. Robert Beto O'Rourke is busy jogging home in a dress shirt so he doesn't get another DUI. And Stacey Abrams is too preoccupied as governor of Georgia to falsely claim she won a presidential race. Enter California's half-human Ken doll, half-hair-gel Cheshire cat, Gavin Newsom. With Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis emerging as one of the highest-profile Republicans, even though he creates hurricanes and flies illegal immigrants to Martha's Vineyard, just like Hitler, Gavin Newsom has thrown his greasy hat into the ring. He is the white veneered knight that no one wants. The hero California didn't deserve and really didn't need. A man who can unlock his jaw and swallow his prey whole, with a side of guac. He believes he is the man who will stand up to Ron DeSantis, who is now worse than Donald Trump apparently. While people are fleeing California in their thousands in a reverse gold rush scenario, rather than looking in the mirror and questioning his own policies, because, let's be honest, Gavin Newsom loves the mirror, he's blaming Trump for the mass exodus and leaning into his record to take his 2022 gubernatorial race national. He's spending hundreds of thousands of dollars running ads in states like Florida. He's trying to feast on the leftovers of the attention DeSantis is getting like a thirsty vulture, challenging him to a debate. He's boasting about California's record on fighting climate change, more on that later, and he's putting up billboards in red states like Texas, Oklahoma, and Mississippi, promoting abortion by quoting Jesus. Now, I'm just your average run-of-the-mill British Jew, but I think it's safe to bet that when Jesus said love your neighbor as yourself, there is no greater commandment than these, he wasn't endorsing Planned Parenthood. Also, let's remember that this is Gavin "Any Twosome Newsom" we're talking about, the man who once had sex with his secretary, who was the wife of his chief campaign advisor, or while he was separated from his first wife, Kimberly Guilfoyle. But when you're competing with the likes of Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, you need at least one sex scandal to put you on the map. But make no mistake, Gavin Newsom has his dead eyes set on the White House, the only thing in the country brighter than his teeth. With this in mind, people really need to understand that Gavin Newsom destroys everything in his path. He turned San Francisco into a shithole, he turned California into San Francisco, and if he gets into the White House, he'll turn the country into California. Not this California, this California. And no, this isn't from an apocalyptic movie. Honestly, an apocalypse would spruce California up a little bit. People need to know who Newsom is. So, where do we even begin? Well, first off, Gavin Newsom is a member of the four families who essentially run California. The Browns, the Pelosi's, the Newsoms, and the Gettys, who all got richer as they got more powerful. Basically, if you want power in California and you're not in one of these families, you're shit out of luck. He first entered the world of politics in 1995, volunteering for Willie Brown's mayoral campaign. This is the same Willie Brown who, as a 60-year-old married man, dated Kamala Harris when she was 29 and helped launch her career. Presumably, Gavin Newsom wasn't quite as dedicated. Unlike the future vice president, Newsom went up in the world. He was given a bunch of cushy jobs and, at 30 years old, became the youngest member of San Francisco's Board of Supervisors in 1997. At the time, he described himself as a social liberal and a fiscal watchdog. Presumably the kind of watchdog who sees an intruder and proceeds to hump his leg. And before you knew it, he ran for mayor in 2003, with endorsements from Bill Clinton, Al Gore, and Jesse Jackson, pledging to address San Francisco's homelessness epidemic. He was re-elected again in 2007, against no serious opposition, promising again to focus on homelessness. And after a few years of not doing any of that, in classic politics fashion, Gavin Newsom continued to fail up, announcing his run for governor of California in the 2010 election. He dropped out with low poll numbers, but then went on to win the lieutenant governor position, serving under Jerry Brown of the Brown family, one of San Francisco's four families. Weird, huh? He was re-elected in 2014, and in 2019, he then succeeded Brown as governor of California. Turns out all you need to succeed in California is sheer grit and determination. And the right last name, a privilege that no one wants to talk about. And during that time, having destroyed San Francisco, Gavin Newsom moved on to destroy the state of California. First off, let's take a look at homelessness. Not only did it increase in San Francisco under Gavin Newsom as mayor, it exploded across the entire state under him as governor. As of January 2020, over 161,000 people were homeless in California. While 12% of Americans lived in California at that time, the state was home to 28% of all homeless people in the country. All as California essentially incentivizes homelessness, making cities like San Francisco unrecognizable and utterly uninhabitable, unless you like dodging poop and needles on your way to work. On the subject of crime, Gavin Newsom has failed too. Between 2020 and 2021, the latest data we have, homicides were up 7.2%. When a weapon was identified, 75% involved a firearm, despite the fact that California has some of the strictest so-called gun control policies in effect. Violent crimes increased by 6.7%, property crimes by 3%, all while the total arrest rate decreased by 7.3%. And what did Gavin Newsom do to address this? He oversaw statewide policy which included the closure of prisons and the release of tens of thousands of inmates, including bank robbers, kidnappers, and murderers. His work on prison reform also included signing Senate Bill 132 in 2020, the Transgender Respect, Agency, and Dignity Act. This allowed prison inmates to be housed based on their gender identity. 1 year later, a lawsuit was filed after a biological male allegedly sexually assaulted a female prisoner in a women's prison. They also reportedly referred to her attacker as a transgender woman with a penis. Even when some of the nation's most vulnerable are under attack, you've got to stay woke. This bill was written by State Senator Scott Wiener, not a joke, possibly the most radical lower-level politician in the country. He also co-authored Senate Bill 239, which makes it a misdemeanor, not a felony, to intentionally expose someone to HIV without their knowledge or consent. As if that's not enough, he also introduced Senate Bill 145, which looks to protect adults who have involuntary oral or anal sex with minors no more than 10 years younger than the perpetrator. Both were signed into law, either by Jerry Brown or by Gavin Newsom. So while homelessness, crime, and transgender ridiculousness have exploded under Gavin Newsom, surely he's had some luck dealing with climate, right? Wrong. Under Gavin Newsom, California has experienced an ongoing electric grid crisis. When it gets hot in the summer, because California gets hot in the summer, Californians are now getting used to PG&E, who are among the worst people on the earth, by the way, just turning their power off. This is while mass wildfires have become an annual occurrence, but don't worry, state-level forest management isn't to blame. It's climate change. The solution being, shockingly, more climate change policy in the form of Newsom's obsessive and expensive push for clean energy, forcing Californians to rely on renewable energy sources like solar and wind, which are simply unable to carry the load, with California importing more electricity than any other state. That's right, California, which has one of the largest oil reserves in the nation, has to import 20 to 30% of its energy. Oh, and don't expect things to get better. Under Gavin Newsom, California will ban the sale of new gas-powered cars by 2035. But to be fair, you'll probably be murdered before you need to worry about not being able to drive to work by that point. And then last but not least, there's the fact that Gavin Newsom became one of the nation's shiny dictators during the COVID-19 pandemic. He enforced mass lockdowns, draconian vaccine requirements for public and private schools, and statewide indoor mask mandates. He shut down certain political rallies, schools, and churches, and along with the governors of Pennsylvania, New York, Michigan, and New Jersey, forced COVID-positive seniors into nursing homes. You weren't allowed to go to the beach on your own, but you were allowed to riot under the banner of Black Lives Matter. And throughout the pandemic, Gavin Newsom continually lauded his own success, even though almost a third of all California restaurants never opened again, and children in California had the lowest in-class in-person schooling than any other state in the country. But that didn't stop Gavin Newsom from flying to DC this summer to get the 2022 Frank Newman Award for statewide innovation to celebrate his educational prowess, and all while being a massive hypocrite. He banned state funding of travel to red states whose COVID laws weren't strict enough, and then went on vacation to Montana, one of these evil states, with California taxpayers covering his security bill. He forced anyone with a pulse to wear a mask, but was seen hobnobbing with other hypocrites at the NFC Championship game in LA without wearing a mask. Then, he lied about it.
I was very judicious yesterday, very judicious, and you'll see the photo that I did take where Magic was kind enough, generous enough to ask me for a photograph, and in my left hand's the mask, and I took a photo. The rest of the time I wore it, as we all should.
More images like this of a maskless Governor Newsom popped up at the Rams 49ers NFC Championship game.
He sent his kids back to private school to enjoy in-person learning, while regular, unimportant kids stayed locked in their homes as public schools remain closed, including in Sacramento County, where he lives. And perhaps worst of all, while the entire state was on lockdown, businesses were shutting down and closing their doors forever, and Californians were suffering physically, mentally, and financially, he attended an indoor $1,200 a plate dinner at the Michelin-star French Laundry in Napa. Without a mask, because who can kiss their own ass with a mask on? In the coming months, if Joe Biden wanders into traffic or gets lost at Walmart, the Democrats are going to be looking for someone to fill the void. And Gavin Newsom is going to be desperate to take up the mantle. Don't let the media reinvent him as America's Governor 2.0, now that Andrew Cuomo is gone forever. Gavin Newsom destroyed San Francisco. Then he destroyed California. If he wins in 2024, he'll destroy the entire country. I don't care that the idiots on The View think he's dishy. Come election time, we need every American to know that Gavin Newsom is the worst. Thanks for joining me. Please don't forget to hit that like button, the notifications bell, subscribe to the channel for other videos, follow me on all social media. I'll see you next time on Off Limits with me, Ian Haworth. Off Limits with Ian Haworth was created by Ian Haworth, produced by Austin Stevens, executive producer Ian Haworth, written by Ian Haworth, Austin Stevens, and Nick Sheehan, Italian fascist Nick Sheehan. Off Limits with Ian Haworth is a Half Crown Productions show. Copyright Half Crown Productions 2022.